The symbolism of the loom and weaving, tapestries, threads and carpets. If we imagine a loom with its warp and weft threads, there will be a part of the final work that is complete, the past. A part that is being worked on, the present. And a part with a pattern marked out that is the future. Thus the loom is another symbol for the great work, the plan for the creation, evolution and final destruction of the universe. Every participant in this plan thus has a part of this symbolic loom as they work on the fabric of their lives. The pattern going forward may be of their own design, or may have been determined for them as their destiny. Where the person is absolutely key to the plan, then the pattern for them will be completely worked out in advance, but invisible, and will only become apparent as each line of thread is revealed. This is the mystic's path. A mystic takes each day at a time and uses the opportunities that arise. Those that are perhaps not as key may have considerable free will to choose their own design for life, even into the future. But nobody has completely free will. All that happens is that a pattern emerges for a short time, which they feel they must follow, and when it is complete, they go back to deciding the pattern themselves. Aggregation and tapestries. Science and metaphysics combine in this symbolism, and to demonstrate this I will quote from Sir James Jeans, Professor of Applied Mathematics at both Cambridge and Princeton universities in the early 1900s. Sir James Jeans, The Mysterious Universe. Just as a cable is formed of a great number of fine threads, so the world line of a large body like the Sun is formed of the innumerable smaller world lines of atoms. We may think of the whole as a tapestry, whose threads are the world lines of atoms. Insofar as atoms are permanent and indestructible, the thread-like world lines of the atoms traverse the whole length of the picture in the direction of time advancing. In other words, we have to imagine the current crosswise weft thread with its knots, the present, as being the Earth or a universe in its entirety, like a flat Earth. Sir James Jeans, The Mysterious Universe. The world line of the Earth is a small cable made up of several strands, these representing the mountains, trees, aeroplanes, human bodies, and so on, the aggregate of which makes up the Earth. Each strand is made up of many threads, the world lines of its atoms. A strand that represents a human body does not differ in any observable essentials from the other strands. Now imagine the knots in a carpet and think of them as the state of the atoms at that present moment. The totality of the knots, the atom states, is then the world at that point in time. In other words, this one-dimensional line of working describes the aggregates in effect at that point. One sweep of the symbolic shuttle or the path of a weaver along the entire line of the fabric, making new knots, is then an instant in time. And below the weaver is a record of the past state, and the new line of working becomes the new state. So there is no need for the atoms to move or the threads to be jiggled about. The weaver just picks up the new colour, state, needed for the new knot. In other words, our conscious self normally perceives only the present. The past exists but cannot be seen with the normal 5 senses. The future may be faintly mapped out, but again, cannot be perceived with the 5 senses. But, hypothetically, if we move our consciousness down a line of perception, a warp thread, we should be able to experience the past as it was, line after line after line, by looking along the weft threads, the completed pattern in the carpet of life, rolling out just like a scroll. In mystic thought, this is known as exploring group perception. If, however, one travels up a line of perception, the warp thread again, and one is a mystic, one may be able to prophesy by discerning something of the faint pattern etched out ready for the knots to be tied. The loom, time and consciousness. We now have to imagine that each warp thread is a record of all we perceive with our 5 senses, perceptions, a sort of log of events. On each life, reincarnation, we may get a new personality, but the line of perception stays intact as one single thread, filled in by the past and perhaps faintly mapped out in the future. What holds this thread together as one continuous thread? Our immortal soul, known also as the higher spirit or even the Atman. Thus our mortal soul may die, and even our old personality disappear, but the higher spirit continues from life to life, keeping our perceptions together. It may even keep a record of what happens between lives, called the bardo state. So really, we, the immortal we, is composed of all our perceptions from our very beginning, plus our higher spirit. Sir James Jeans, The Mysterious Universe. We can most simply interpret consciousness as something residing entirely outside the picture and making contact with it only along the world lines of our bodies. Your consciousness touches the picture only along your world line, mine along my world line, and so on. The effect produced by this contact is primarily one of the passage of time. We feel as if we were being dragged along our world line, so as to experience the different points on it, which represent our states at the different instants of time, in turn. It may be that time from its beginning to the end of eternity is spread before us in this picture, but we are in contact with only one instant, just as the bicycle wheel is in contact with only one point of the road. Robert Frost. From the poetry of Robert Frost. Ours is to behave like a kitchen spoon of a size Titanic, to keep all things stirred in a blend mechanic, saying, that's the tune, that's the pretty kettle, matter mustn't curd, separate and settle, action is the word. In effect, although the shuttle is whizzing backwards and forwards, marking out the tick-tock of each execution, each conscious self drives its part of this process. Jerome Cardan, De Subtilate Rerum Libri, 21, Nuremberg, in folio, 1550. 13th of August 1491, Milan, Italy. 7 men appeared before philosopher Facius Cardano, Fazio Cardano, in his study. According to his son Jerome, the story left by his father, a mathematically gifted lawyer and friend of Leonardo da Vinci, read as follows. When I had completed the customary rites, at about the 20th hour of the day, 7 men duly appeared to me, clothed in silken garments, resembling Greek togas, and wearing, as it were, shining shoes. The undergarments beneath their glistening and ruddy breastplates seemed to be wrought of crimson, and were of extraordinary glory and beauty. When asked who they were, they said they were men composed, as it were, of air, but still subject to birth and death. They remained with my father for over 3 hours, but when he questioned them as to the cause of the universe, they were not agreed. The tallest of them denied that God had created the world at one time. On the contrary, the other added that the world was created from moment to moment, so that should this process stop for an instant, the world would perish.